Postecoglou's got the boot. A number of days ago now, of course. It was Friday that announced that he'd been sacked. Sad times for Ange Postecoglou, but if just to remind you, everybody, the club statement read, whilst winning the Europa League this season ranks as one of the club's greatest moments, we cannot base our decision on emotions aligned to this triumph. It is crucial that we are able to compete on multiple fronts and believe a change of approach will give us the strongest chance for the coming season and beyond. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's the sensible option, isn't it? I mean, the argument for keeping him is a romantic one. And I think
romance is dead, Jim.
Well, there's that, but just looking at the way the domestic season went, you can't discount it, can you? You just can't.
Would he have not at some
honestly,
point?
You're right. You just can't.
No.
Would Ange not have said at some point that we need to prioritise here, and this could be an opportunity to get the Champions League? We don't have the depth of squad to get here in a league.
Respect the people who paid money for the tickets.
Yeah, I mean,
it can still be better than it was, can't it?
It was so piss poor.
Also, their proximity to the final, even just considering the knockout stages, when that took place in February, or certainly started in February, by which point they were so far off it.
Pretty dead in the water.
Yeah.
But you got to see some nice teenagers got to fill the gaps.
Well, you kind of say that it's slightly jokingly, but actually those players have, Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall in particular, have really learned a lot, I would say, this season. They've really, really been in the trenches and in the firing line. And I think that will be very, very character building based on how those players seem to be.
In the same way falling down the stairs is character building.
Yeah, you
bruise forming.
You drag yourself out of the canal and you carry on, don't you, when you have a setback?
Callus creating.
But there's also this thing of the kids, like Bergvall and Archie Gray coming through. I think we saw over the last few days that it wasn't just limited to them. The number of players who've come out and put out really emotional messages on social media, that shouldn't be sniffed at. I appreciate it's easy to post on social media, but honestly, I make a note of checking every time a manager gets sacked, because that's the biggest tell of whether the squad are happy. And he clearly,
little bin dipper. I didn't expect such tabloid journalistic.
Because I think it's always
approaches from you.
But it's always a good gauge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
what did Ten Hag get?
Yeah, well, exactly.
What did he get?
Exactly, like one or two things, if that.
Yeah.
You were a manager. Full stop.
Yeah.
This happened.
This happened.
But there's can I have my 50p back? But there's something to be said with the emotional attachment that he had with the squad. We knew that anyway. He constantly defended them, even when there were times when they were really, really bad. I think it was Kulusevski quite famously came out and was like, no, we're like, I understand why this looks shit, but we are really trying. We back him unequivocally. But it felt like this was the only move to make. I mean, you could argue that either which way, it was comical. Spurs have sacked a manager that's brought them silverware for the first time in ages, although they would have kept a manager who lost 22 league games last season.
Yeah. They couldn't win either way, the board.
No,
really.
but I think they have made a decision that we kind of spoke about before the final, really, didn't we?
Yes.
That they could, and part of it was my own experience with my club, Manchester United, with the Ten Hag thing after the FA Cup win against Manchester City, where
Parallels
it was like, look, it might be the best thing if you go out on that high and walk away. That didn't happen. This has happened. And it's interesting that I don't think we should lose sight of the emotional side of it for Spurs fans as well. But it is interesting about this cycle we talk about with Spurs. And I appreciate Thomas Frank is a new contender for this job, and it sounds like he's a favourite. But the fact that Mauricio Pochettino has already come out to have to distance himself from the job.
For now.
Yeah, but does that not speak to the cycle that they were in before Ange, if that makes sense?
Possibly.
In terms of they have that trophy now, they're in the Champions League. This is very different.
Yes.
This is a very different Spurs from the one that was pining over Pochettino, over the last couple of cycles of managers.
Well, I think that's it. That when you say it's a different Spurs, it's a chance to be.
Yes.
As Andy Brassel said, there's a chance for a reset.
Yeah.
With the words that he said, and I completely agree with that. And I think
that lack of depth, though, in a Champions League,
but you've got the summer to recruit.
Address that now. I also think they had the most injuries in the league, Spurs, and that that of course has an effect on whatever team suffers that. You would hope that they wouldn't have that again, or they would hope that they wouldn't have that again next season. You obviously get to augment the squad, and also it's a better squad than a 17th place finish, isn't it?
Of course, it's a better squad. In terms of the injuries,
Well, I mean, it's it's a Europa League squad.
Well, indeed.
Well, it is. I mean,
the 8th richest club in the world.
Yeah.
No, but that's it, Pete. You're right. Spurs are a huge club, and they, I say should be. Again, you look at the top of the Premier League table. They are one of the clubs in England that their ambition every season should be to be playing in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And they, let's be honest, got through the cat flap in the back door, but they got there. Fair play to them. They absolutely did.
I mean, your cat flap, mate.
Are they in the Club World Cup now?
Why? Get them in.
Might be a hindrance.
Get them all in. But I mean, to win that Europa League, Jose Mourinho said it back in October. He said Manchester United and Spurs are easily the favourites for this tournament, no matter what's going on in the league. That they'll be there or thereabouts. So
for the strength of their league more than the strength of the actual team themselves.
Well, exactly. Over the strength, but the finances they've got. Again, without taking any emotion away, the scenes in by the Tottenham Stadium in North London, they were great. I was genuinely pleased for those. Fine, Jim. It's about the little victories, as Tottenham will attest to.
It's talking about Robbie Williams.
They were. I was genuinely made up for them, absolutely. But the fact is, right now, what are we doing from here? Are you going to keep Ange Postecoglou? I thought it was the position was kind of untenable, really, because of what had happened. But I genuinely think, for everyone concerned, it's better this way.
Yeah,
I really, really do.
Well,
and I think
his legacy is defined by this now, isn't
exactly,
it?
Exactly, Jim. You're absolutely spot on. For Ange Postecoglou, who's a guy who, yes, he can be a bit chippy and spiky, but I like him more than I dislike him, if you know what I mean.
And also, he has a legacy there, where a lot of managers don't really.
Exactly. And I think for Postecoglou, who he can leave with his head held high, which seems extraordinary considering they finished 17th, okay? But he can do, and he'll be now fondly remembered. And he'll always, if he ever does go back and watch a game there or do any kind of work there, people will be happy to see him. If he'd have stayed on another season, I couldn't imagine it improving a hell of a lot personally. And if he does, he'd be sacked by November maybe, whether that's his fault or not.
The Ten Hag parallels are there, aren't they?
Exactly,
yeah.
Vish, exactly. So the fact is, he's gone now. And Spurs...
fifth place finish?
It seems a long time ago.
It does feel like a long time ago.
But Ten Hag, what were they? Finished third under Ten Hag, was it? And won the League Cup as well. So things can turn quickly.
I think the important thing at this juncture as well is we don't necessarily need to go and reverse engineer what Ange achieved, or whether they were favourites or whatever.
Right.
But we are in a position now where Daniel Levy in ENIC's ownership of Spurs puts it right at their door. And I know we constantly say that with Levy and the ownership of Tottenham across various different situations. But this is the first time that they've actually been presented with an opportunity to start from a position of strength. And for all the dismay among Spurs fans at the ownership and the fact that they've made such a ruthless decision to get rid of Postecoglou, they can have no complaints. From now on, everything is on their terms, whether it's Levy or ENIC, everything is on their terms, and they will have to live and die by what happens between now and the start of the season. Who they get in, the transfers they are able to get over the line, and then from then on, the season this has. Because we should really and truly, and I appreciate it doesn't work like this with owners, but they should, their reputations should be on the line by what happens at the end of this upcoming season. And if it goes badly for Spurs, that's grounds to move on. Yeah. Because they're never going to get a cleaner, quote-unquote, purer situation than this for their means and for their ambitions with the club.
Yeah, because Postecoglou really, with that Europa League win, and I know I say, they were the favourites, but they won it, so all the credit in the world. But he's thrown them an enormous bone.
The revenue that they're going to get.
Him and his Spurs team winning that trophy has dug the club out completely of a hole. If they didn't,
of a hole that he was also
of course
down there as well.
But that's why you saw the despair at Manchester United. A little bit of a different situation because financially they're in a far worse position than Spurs. But in terms of the playing, it was always seen whoever loses that game, it will be damning. But Spurs won it, and they got the celebration, and they're back in the Champions League. And of course, just one more thing. Sorry to say on Ange, he also, with that quote of "I always win a trophy in the second season," that is preserved.
It's an iconic thing.
That that is up on the wall in glass now. Do you know what I mean? Like
there's very little swagger, I think, in successful swagger that can be backed up with an actual result.
Totally,
in football, isn't there?
So you're right. I think he genuinely has some sort of legacy. It seems remarkable finishing that lowly in the table, but football's a funny old game.
Absolutely, and his next move is fascinating now, isn't it?
Yeah. It wouldn't shock me to see him managing again in the Premier League.
No, me neither.
But we shall see. But who now do Spurs turn to?
Do you think in either situation, because Thomas Frank, we mentioned there, so that's Brentford without manager.
Yep.
Marco Silva has also been linked. There's Fulham without a manager.
I thought there would be a job swap with Silva.
Yeah, I mean that's what. But would you take that?
I said before I wouldn't be opposed to it, to be honest with you, because I think if you are a fan of a mid-table side in the Premier League, which I am, with Postecoglou, if he gets the bit between his teeth, which he can, and we saw that with Spurs. Yes, you might lose some games and be a bit crap, but you'll also see some entertainment and some swashbuckling stuff.
You've got a hard-working squad as well.
Yes, exactly. So I obviously hope that Spurs hone in on. Sorry,
and he'll work them hard.
Yeah, that is the problem.
I'd like to see him with Adama Traore to play with.
Yeah,
how much ground can a man cover in a season?
That's true. But I mean, look, I hope that the reports are right and that Spurs are honing in on Thomas Frank rather than Marco Silva. And Brentford have given Thomas Frank, according to Sky Sports, they have given Frank permission to speak to Tottenham Hotspur.
It feels like a good time for him to make this sort of leap, doesn't it?
Yeah. But he's leaping into a situation where, like, for a Champions League club, looking at, I know earlier it says add-ons and stuff, but like Heung-min Son, 31, he's on 190 grand a week. Mm-hmm. And then there's James Maddison 170 and Cristiano Romero at 165. Is that a Champions League, like a sort of proper European concrete? Well, I guess they are because they just won a competition. But is that a Champions League bothering squad? Like wage
in terms
structure?
of doing a Villa and getting into the knockouts and putting an impression on the tournament. Well, Son has gone all the way in the tournament before.
Yeah.
He's
long time ago,
looked a bit leggy, I suppose.
I mean, I think there's talk he could move on in the summer as well. Obviously, we don't know yet. We can only speculate. Probably would be a good time to do it. While at the same 100%. Time, you also, if you're someone, you probably think, one last crack at the Champions League would be good, though.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to make some additions in the summer. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And
Van de Ven's on 50 grand a week.
Really?
Basuma's on 55 grand a week. And I know there are add-ons. Brennan Johnson, 70 grand. You look at that squad and you just sort of go, well, the wages aren't quite there, you would say. Even as a person, rank outside, doesn't really understand how this all works, and with add-ons and stuff like that. That basic pay isn't even what a German side would pay.
Yeah, there's a big part.
You wouldn't get out of bed for that.
I wouldn't get out of bed for that.
But there's a big gap to plug, isn't there? Going from the season they've had to going for a Champions League squad. But that's what this window is about, and that the windfall that you get from being there will allow them to augment it. And again, this is a better squad than the league positions suggest as well.
But this goes back to
Romero was fairly recently linked with Real Madrid, and it's spurious. But he was the Serie A player of the season before he joined Tottenham.
Alfie Whiteman's apparently on 7.5 grand a week, and he's got to go to cinema.
Yeah,
twice a week. He's a big cinephile, isn't he?
They're much more expensive these days.
Yeah. Well, you get a annual pass, don't you?
Yeah. To be fair, there's probably cinema in the Tottenham Hotspur stadium.
I'm really not worried about the cinema stuff, but
let Alfie buy some popcorn.
Yeah,
that's the campaign. But it all goes back to Vish's point, and a lot of Spurs fans have said this time and time again. It's on the board now. You want to re-establish yourself as a Champions League club or playing in the Champions League regularly. You've got to spend. That is the harsh reality of it. And if Tottenham don't spend a fair old whack this summer on new players and attract players with wages and all that kind of stuff. Look at Villa's wage bill. I mean, it's ridiculous, quite frankly, and other clubs that are in the mix as well. So that's what they have to do, and that has always been the frustration,
issue, isn't it? It's spending a near old whack. Has been the problem.
Indeed, Jim. Absolutely. Much was made. How many times have you heard Spurs fans talk about that season with Pochettino when they needed a refresh and they didn't do it?
Player,
just been in the Champions League final. We're going well, and that was a chance, and they didn't do it. This is another chance, and this, as I say, really is a fortuitous chance, if you see what I mean by that. And it's all at the board's door, as it tends to be in football, but very, very starkly in this case. But if they were to turn to Thomas Frank, I mean, do you think that would be a good appointment? Because he's only managed Brentford in the Premier League, to much critical acclaim, of course. But what would you say to that, Vish?
My gut says it would be good. I think he's got a good way about him. I appreciate some people find him annoying. I'm just kind of caveating that because it's the internet.
I like him. I
like him. But I
he's
think
the type of manager you want managing your club.
But I think people, it's
don't pander to them. Don't worry about them.
yeah, fine. See, he's a bit of a creep. But what?
Creep. You found some weird stuff in his bins, have you?
Yeah,
It sounds like it.
but
He's a big character.
Yeah. So the point I was going to make was it's hard to gauge how much of him is him being allowed to, I suppose, flourish, given the more holistic side to football ownership that Brentford's owners have. And because obviously he's a bit more involved in transfers, there's obviously the statistical side of it and their use of data, which he's very much a part of, and because it's quite top down there, he feels a bit more involved. And I feel like whatever players come in through the door, and even when they go out, actually, he's a lot more involved in that. The thing we've seen with managers when they've moved to teams like Tottenham is how they spend money and how they spend that extra money that they're now privy to. Obviously, we don't really know all that much about him, but I suppose based on what I've said in terms of scouting and recruitment, then he's going to be quite sensible about it, or certainly he's going to come from a place where he's going to do his research. I wonder if, partly because he's quite amenable, as you mentioned there, it comes across really well, that kind of picks up that slack from Ange. You don't necessarily... If Ange had gone without the Europa League trophy, what they probably would have done by instinct is go the other way. You see the way these extremes work with managers, and it's like someone who's really hands-on to someone who's really hands-off. You need someone in the middle. Frank probably is the best bridge of, or certainly the one who meets them halfway in that regard compared to like Silva. Silva's feels, he's literally your manager right now as a Fulham fan, but he feels a bit more hands off and perhaps not quite as kind of chummy with the squad. Is that fair to say?
Possibly. I think Silva definitely likes to get alongside the players. I would have thought Frank would have been one of those managers who's quite, when you say chummy with the players, I think he would. I think he
talks a lot about how much he loves the players, basically, as people, and how important managing is. Like Ange says about creating good human beings or whatever. Like Frank very much ascribes to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, sure. I think Frank. I mean, some have said. Again, with Tottenham, some are saying, the same old concerns are there. Suddenly we're just going to jolt to another different direction and another totally different manager, and we keep doing this. And it's like, well, I understand that.
I think this is an extreme circumstance, though, isn't it?
This is different. I mean, I know that the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust have said this, and they said, our concern now is that it appears that we've got yet another change of direction. We can only hope that the right decision has been made and that the new manager is fully supported by the board, and everyone at the club has to build on the cup success that Ange has lain. Again, quite generous to say that, I think, for Ange, but okay, I understand it. I think Frank's pragmatism and tactical flexibility could be perfect for them.
I really do. Those are his two standout qualities for sure. Brentford are very, very difficult to beat. Occasionally they have games where they concede a decent number, but I suppose you expect that from a team with the financial situation of Brentford. And he is very flexible, isn't he? So quite often you see they might have a little period where, they've not won at home for a while, or they've been a bit shonky away for a while, or there's some little story about Brentford like that, and he course corrects it quite often very well, and he'll have a much, much bigger budget at Tottenham.
He's got a better squad,
if he can keep that structure that makes them difficult to beat, it would give them a really, really good platform.
Well, what was the criticism of Postecoglou last season? Is he won't change his style, although he massively did for the Europa League.
Sure.
And look where and they won it. So I think that he would be a really good choice, and I think that it's kind of inevitable, the work he's done at Brentford, that he was always going to get a bigger job in the Premier League. He was linked to Manchester United for ages. Obviously, Tottenham is, there's serious interest now. So, stay away from Marco Silva.
Right, okay.
Tottenham, that's crucial.
That's
in this
what
whole
this
chat.
is really about, isn't it?
Yes,
I think so.
I think Frank would be a better appointment.
I do
Silva.
actually, yeah. I do. My heart and my head both say that.
Yeah.
I think someone from Spurs will now be at the Dixons around the corner, just buying as many iPads as possible, because tactics are bad, baby. We're going to watch videos of players playing football.
Yeah.
Alfie Whiteman, get out of the cinema. We need this big screen.
Yes. Yeah, maybe that's it. It'll be interesting to hear they go for, but we expect that Frank is at the top of the list at the moment, so perhaps it's maybe going to be him. Now, gentlemen, let's talk about a former Premier League manager, Jesse Marsch, of course, currently in charge of the Canada national team. He's made some quite extraordinary allegations. Vancouver Whitecaps faced Cruz Azul in the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup in Mexico City the other day. And, of course, some of the Whitecaps players are national team players for Canada. Now, Cruz Azul won 5-0, so a pretty convincing victory. PSG-esque, you could say.
Same weekend,
Jim. Now, since returning to Canada, only 7 members of the Vancouver Whitecaps' 26-man squad haven't suffered from virus-like symptoms. So 19 of them have contracted some sort of virus-type thing.
They've been kissing.
Maybe.
Oh, I got lip problems.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
7 losers didn't get kissed.
Yeah. No one, 7 of them without cold sores. Is that what it is?
Maybe they're not too accurate with the bottle.
Yeah.
Yes,
Let's not point at anybody.
No.
Jesse,
Perverts just watching.
Jesse Marsch.
7 cucks.
Big
Cup
laugh.
bench.
Too many cucks.
Big laugh from Fish there.
Too many cucks in the CONCACAF.
Oh, wait. Now, Jesse Marsch didn't hold back. He said, "It's for me appalling that this is the second year in a row that the CONCACAF and the powers that be have allowed a Major League Soccer team to go down to Mexico for a big final and get poisoned."
Sorry.
Get poisoned.
Big shout. innit?
Second time in a row.
shout,
You've got to let them get poisoned.
Yeah.
In Mexico.
Bring a sandwich, lads.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Drink the water.
Something has to be done to protect these environments.
Has it been proven that they were poisoned?
He adds.
Yeah. Look, I don't have any proof here that this happened.
Sorry.
But it's not random.
I mean, isn't the nature of a virus that it spreads, right? So
Yeah.
if one person has a virus, it makes perfect sense that it's going to run around the squad.
Jim in the pocket of big poison.
Jim in the pocket of Mexican poison. Jim, if this was in the
I'll be
Champions
honest,
They have
League...
such
I'll be
nice
honest,
shirts, some lovely poison.
I want them to have poisoned the Vancouver Whitecaps. I want to make that very clear. It's funny. I hope no one's seriously hurt and it's fine. But that is... It's nonsense. And it's the reason this show exists. It's bullshit.
As we record this show in the Western Conference, Vancouver have just beaten Seattle Sounders 3-0. So
Yeah, they're feeling better. aren't they?
feeling better.
They in turn poison the Seattle Sounders.
Exactly. Let's
You
see
know
how
what?
the
There's
Seattle
something to
Sounders
this.
go. Yeah.
They kissed the Seattle
kiss the
Sounders
Seattle
before the
Sounders.
game.
Do they do a pre-match handshake? We're just going to ramp this up a bit if you don't...
Yeah.
Look, I think data is at kind of its pinnacle now, isn't it? Every club has a data section or a data department. Maybe every club now will have like a biological warfare department.
Yeah.
Try and get one over on the opponent.
Marginal gains.
Yeah.
Biological marginal gains. Lovely.
It's the future.
It really is the future.
It's the regrettable future.
In more ways than one.
Pre-regrettable future.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Let's move on from this nonsense and go for a quick break, and after which we're going to talk about England.
Good morning, England! You tell us something your mum doesn't know. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Football Ramble, everybody. Now, we should say that we are recording this pod on Monday afternoon, so we haven't had the Scotland and Wales games. That's why we're not talking about them. But we're back on Wednesday, and we'll talk about Scotland and Wales then. We will talk about England versus Senegal, though. That is happening at the City Ground, Nottingham Forest Ground, of course. It's the first time England have played there, or will have played there, in 84 years.
Wow.
That seems mad.
All before you were born, Peter.
I thought it was a... would it have been a... It was a Euros.
Euro 96,
Euro
yeah,
96,
but England played all their games famously at Wembley.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Greedy.
Very greedy. Finished top of their group to make sure that continued in the knockouts, but still...
All right, Marcus.
Still,
all right,
I just want to make sure.
Put it away.
The little...
Put it away.
I mean, Senegal are 19th in the old FIFA ranking, so I mean, this is you would say that's a sterner test.
Yeah.
Probably the sternest outside of qualification.
Outside of a team of Stern Johns.
Between now and the World Cup.
I haven't looked at their fixture list between now and the World
I think
Cup.
England play a top 10 team, certainly.
I think that was the point, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Rock roll.
Yeah, so struggled against the 173rd ranked side in the world. So England should get pummeled tonight, Jim. Is that what you're saying?
Should we poison them?
Shall we poison Senegal?
Is that what Thomas Tuchel's going to go look round? He's going to go get the poison.
Doing it in other places.
Poison. Maybe this year will be the year of poisonings. Just
Maybe.
people just absolutely.
Well, there was so
Like the opposite of the enhanced games.
Yeah.
They're really elite athletes, but they've all been
Sleeping,
poisoned.
vomiting, their fingernails are falling off.
If we're going to talk about this, you have to.
Someone's turned purple.
To where years ago, when the man was alive, of course, Diego Maradona had a show in
did he die?
Argentina.
To be fair, he did it to himself.
I was about to say, in a way,
He loved poison.
In a way.
he loved all the poison.
He loved all the poison.
Let's be clear about that.
Shoveling that poison in, wasn't he?
No tax on the poison, to be fair. Don't have to pay tax on it. Because you frequently buy it in car parks.
Flush it down the toilet as well.
Yeah.
Is there a barcode on the bag? Right.
Tariff
Enough.
it.
It's bad.
Right, it's bad.
Maradona had a TV show in Argentina.
Yeah.
It was, I say, many moons ago.
This is the one where he did kick-ups with Pele.
Yes, I
Is that
believe
it?
so.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there was a little confessions corner part of the show.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Imagine.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can get away with a lot on TV, presumably in Argentina. But he said, I can't remember if it was him or one of his guests who was in the 1990 Argentina World Cup squad. So I think the goalkeeper Goycochea was maybe on the show. But anyway,
Okay.
whoever it was on that show, they said that apparently somebody put a little bit of something in the Brazilian players' water. And they played them in the second round of that tournament. They won 1-0. He got a famous assist where he drew all the players and slotted in Claudio Canija, who finished. And apparently, like a couple of the Brazilian players had said they felt a bit dizzy or lightheaded or whatever. So it was one of those ones.
Water had been thrown to them from the other bench, hadn't it? I think?
Whatever it was, Jim.
Was
Yeah,
the story.
it seemed a bit like, are they doing this? Is this a bit of a laugh? I don't know. But it was Argentina, it was Maradona, so all bets are off, quite frankly.
So did he confess to a different thing in each show, or did the guest confess?
Yeah, good question. I can't quite remember how it played out, but I think they were basically just two fully grown men giggling away.
I
about
love the
something.
thought that he's got enough to do a confession in every single show.
Jim, that show could have been an hour.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have finished his confessions, let's be
Strip
honest. But there we are. Back to England versus Senegal. What do we want to see England do this evening other than put in a good performance and win the game? What would you like to see?
I want to see more number 9s, less strychnine, please.
Okay. Right.
I would like,
Kane and Tony up front.
yeah. What I would actually like would be, the team that would start if the World Cup was for some reason brought forward to tomorrow.
Ooh.
Yeah, don't mind
Yeah.
it.
Because
Go big or go home.
Exactly, as we've been discussing a lot, it is a very, very short amount of time that Tuchel has to get his squad ready. I think the Andorra lineup was clearly an unusual one, and we're likely to never see that collection of players play together again. But this time, I'd like to know kind of what he's thinking, I suppose, in terms of what the best lineup he has available for how he wants them to play.
Yeah.
Fish, is it a personnel thing for you that could be the problem for England, or are you thinking the way Tuchel, the way England kind of setting up tactically and so on, is that more of the issue?
Well, I alluded to this on Monday's show. I just think he's just quite pragmatic with this kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm aligned with Jim in that, like, it'd be nice to see as close to a full strength 11 as possible. Saka included. But I also, the thing I'm actually looking forward to is England getting challenged
Yeah.
by a better squad, by a better team,
By better wide players.
Yeah,
Team
better
with a
wide
bit of
players,
pace.
a bit of pace.
A bit of something about
And there's
it, you're right,
a bit of canny in there as well. I think of someone like Nicholas Jackson, who might appreciate he didn't start against Ireland, but he might be starting this game. It feels like they're bringing a few big guns. Certainly, the talk is that they're bringing a few big guns back into their 11, which should be nice and more of a sterner test of England. And also, just you want England to be shit up a bit, don't you?
I know what you mean.
You don't necessarily you don't want them frustrated as they were against Andorra. You want them to right, hit us back.
Yeah, you want to see what you're made of.
Exactly,
What
yeah.
your defence has, what your midfield has when it's actually challenged.
Yeah,
rather
so-
than when it's just kind of setting the tempo.
Exactly, yeah. So I want them put under pressure, and I'm keen to see how they respond, because there's no reason why, in any situation, those players shouldn't triumph over Senegal. And yet at the same time, you kind of look at it with like whether it's Ismaila Sarr or Jackson, and think, right, actually, yeah, run at England, really give them something to think about.
And also, Senegal have the small matter of the Africa Cup of Nations this year, coming in December. So we talk about England preparing for the next World Cup, which of course Senegal will, they would be targeting that as well. But the Africa Cup of Nations is just months away. So these games, you would very much imagine for them to be like, right, we need to figure out what we're doing. So I think it's a much better opponent. Obviously, it's a better opponent than Andorra, for crying out loud. But I think this is a nice game for England to really, as you say, be tested at.
It could have been a Gay versus Gay off, which would have been perfect for Pride weekend.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
Would have been perfect. But somebody had to smash his eye socket.
I don't think Mark Gay would have been.
No, he wouldn't have been. He wouldn't have been.
Yeah. But speaking of Palace players, though, come on, we want to see Eberechi Eze again, don't we? I mean, he came on against Andorra.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Where do we want to see him, though?
Well,
this is the question, isn't it?
Well, I would say that I think that if you think about the wings, right, on the right side, I know we've mentioned Saka, he was left out of the squad, but Saka, that is Saka's position to lose, really, going forward. I don't think too many people would push back on that. That left side, though, is up for grabs. I mean, there was obviously Foden played there all the way back in the Euros. That didn't really work, and Foden is not even in the squad. So to mention him is a waste of time. So who plays on that side? Well, Rashford has played there a little bit under Tuchel already, but not in the squad. Anthony Gordon is an obvious one, and I think Gordon's got a good will from a lot of people, myself included, in this operation.
Not in the form of his life, though.
But not in the form of his life, and I think that Gordon, when he has had the minutes and he has played, he hasn't lit it up too much. He hasn't had that many, though, so don't want to be harsh on him. You could play Madueke. That's the beauty of Madueke. Play either side. And Eze has been brilliant through the back end of last season. Now, he's one of the players in English football, who was.
But he is more effective in those central areas, though, isn't he?
Yeah, but he does play off the left a fair bit, and he can drift inside. So it's more that. And here's the other issue, though: is a player like Eze going to work well with Harry Kane? And I think you would naturally think Gordon would be a better fit with Kane up there, although we haven't seen it sort of click too much, as I say. So this is what Tuchel's got to try and sort out, because England on that left side had a plethora of options, not that long ago, and suddenly it's like, oh, actually. I wouldn't say they're light with Gordon and Eze. I think they're great options, and there are one or two others in there as well. So you want to see some green shoots. You want to see some sort of clicking. And at the moment, it's not really showing too many signs of that. Again, Madueke and Kane linked for the goal, so you kind of, against Andorra. But I mean, if that's all you're going on, it's not too much.
We probably didn't toss him enough credit on Monday, but Curtis Jones's ball to Harry Kane was very nice. Yeah. There's definitely trying and willing there, isn't there?
Yeah, but look, again, though, you're trying to gauge this on how much do you really look into this, and how much are you sort of thinking, just don't worry about it, it'll be fine. When the tournament comes around, it'll be a very different mindset, which it will. Look at Spain ahead of the Euros last summer. Andy Brassel was on record as saying that he don't think he would get out of the group stages. They didn't have that many admirers. They didn't have many people tipping them for the tournament.
Are you telling me we're going to win the World Cup?
Yes.
That's all we needed.
Yeah.
Why did you start with that? Why do we have to go through all the house around the houses with, who's going to play on the left?
Yeah.
What's going to happen here?
This
What are we going to do on Pride weekend?
Sentence long.
Mr. Marcus. Okay. His magical bacon.
Tell us that so we feel better about ourselves.
I can only apologise.
I don't need to worry about who's playing at right back if we're going to win the damn thing.
It's immaterial.
Well, I was just merely wasting time to get to that point. Also, I mean, from now until the World Cup, somebody could emerge. Somebody we haven't heard of, or somebody we have heard of.
Right.
Because Everton have emerged as shock contenders for Jack Grealish's signature. Jack's got a year to get back in this England squad and lead us to glory next summer.
Well, Newcastle
seems unlikely at the moment.
Newcastle are in the frame as well. They're quite fancied him.
Yeah.
Do you think he'd get in over Gordon though?
And Barnes.
Jim, I think it's a great move. Sorry, that's a quote from a bar owner on the big market. So I think it would be a strange thing to do, wouldn't it?
I think it fits perfectly. but it is probably at this juncture beneath Newcastle.
Yeah, and also for Grealish, surely he needs to go in and start and be like one of the first. With Gordon and Barnsley, that's not going to happen, right?
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think he's. I don't see a reason why he couldn't get in there over Barnes.
You reckon?
Yeah,
Barnes is playing.
But the point is,
well.
He's playing well. But I'm saying, like, of the two, like, I'm basically picking the weaker of the two players who he could potentially oust.
We've only got a yellow card drawing fouled monster in Bruno. So
yeah, that's true.
Maybe.
But the thing is, though, wherever Grealish ends up, he's still got to fight for your place.
Sure,
if he goes to a place where he can walk in, he's made the wrong move.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to play at a decent enough standard.
Wrexham.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. He's got to play at a decent enough standard where he's going to be challenged and he's got to make a difference in that team and you've got to work at it. And I think the Newcastle thing fits perfectly because almost selfishly, the Grealish we want to see is the Villa Grealish.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone outside of... I think everyone who's keen for a bit of fun and a bit of joy, self-contained within 90 minutes, doesn't really care for an extension of this Man City not productive, but efficient Grealish. We want to see the flair and stuff like that.
They want to see him at Leeds if they can afford his wages.
Yeah, true. But Newcastle fits perfectly to my mind. But yeah, that's fine.
What we really want to see is him at Newcastle in 1996.
Yeah.
Out on the Raz with Philippe Albert.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yeah, like a training ground bust up with David Ginola, but also like on a night out with David Ginola.
Yeah, nice.
Well, I think with Grealish, if you look at some of the stuff that's been posted on socials, he's been responding. I mean, he replied to some posts, critical posts in the comments saying, I've been bad lately, have I? Scored 3 goals in my last 3 appearances over 45 minutes, but okie dokie, love, kiss. So he's... Then there's some other things. So
firing back.
Yeah, Grealish is... he's more acutely aware than anybody.
It's coincided with the downturn of Man City in general as well. Let's not forget that. And he was already having a difficult time getting
there.
He was, but he did drop off not just this season, but the season after. It was that treble-winning season in 2023. After that, an appropriate noise, you might say, Peter.
But people deal with that stuff differently, and the fact that we see Grealish out more and more, and the fact that it runs parallel with his form is fine to me. Like people deal with it in different ways.
Less of a toss.
But obviously, it's not productive to the standards he needs to set as a footballer. I mean, it's in like on the field. I don't give a shit about the, parenting your own kids and all that. But I do think with him, he's just basically got to decide what player he wants to be and where he wants to be that player.
Yeah,
whether it's positionally and also club-wise.
And he won't be the first player to have had his career stymied by a spell at Manchester City, would he? I mean...
Well, when all said and done, he'll be 30 in September. And, Man City, it was his big move. He will have to... I know Man City have dropped off a bit, but he's not going... I don't think he'll go to a side that have serious ambitions of winning a treble or going for that elite level club. I think that, maybe he could go back to Villa, maybe go to Newcastle, something like that. Maybe
I think it's a European side, isn't it? Or a side competing in Europe,
Spurs.
Surely.
It's a hefty loss, isn't it? Really,
but I think he's got something
on him.
He's got something to prove, and if his chat on social media is anything to go by, he knows that and he wants to do it as well. Yeah. So we shall see. But we do know that former England goalkeeper Scott Carson is set to leave Manchester City as well.
He's had his career ruined.
He's
done nothing.
He's got a lot of medals now, Peter.
He has got a lot of medals.
Because if you take it for the time he's spent on the pitch to the medals he's won, he's won a trophy for every 9.8 minutes of football he played at Man City.
God, how much has this last season brought down that average?
Yeah, that's annoying. Should have left last season.
Yeah, they'll have to change that to medals because presumably, did he get one? Was he in the squad for the FA Cup final? Do your own research. Now, finally, we were saying the other day that the Bellinghams are England's La Masia, which is what you said, actually, Jim, to be fair.
Yeah.
I don't want to take credit for that. You are the man at the forefront of that quote.
I just begged them to have more children for the sake of the national team, and we got to that conclusion ourselves.
Indeed, we did, and they should all start off their journey into fame and stardom with a team in England, and then go to Borussia Dortmund.
Yes,
because Joe Bellingham's move to Borussia Dortmund has been confirmed. £31 million, not cheap.
No,
but he's gone there.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to love
it's
that.
Exciting, isn't it? It's really, really fun. I'm just going to repeat myself here. I think, obviously, if you're Joe Bellingham, it's very difficult to get away from your brother's shadow. And he's just gone, yeah, fine. All right. It's nice in here. I'm
I like
comfortable
it.
here.
Yeah, it's cool.
I'll do my own thing in a shadow.
In the same way that England are obviously spending a bit of time in tents to prepare for the warm weather in America.
They've gone camping.
Should climb into Jude Bellingham's mum.
Thanks for listening to the Football Ramble, part of the Acast Creator Network. Myself, Jim, and Vish are back tomorrow.
I'm not coming back.
Don't worry. No, note you, Jim, and me. We're not having him. He was meant to be,
right.
but I've just struck him off. We're back tomorrow to talk about that England game and much, much more. Make sure
Much less.
Make sure you subscribe in your podcast app so you never miss an episode.
Finish the episode. Close it.
Thanks, Vish.
Close the door. Done.
No, yeah. Thanks, Pete.
Seriously, if you do have blue lips or skin, difficulty swallowing or breathing, increased
Jim, say
saliva,
goodbye.
do
Bye.
phone an ambulance.
Okay, so
You
thanks,
have been
Jim.
poisoned.
I've done it. Get out of here.
We're just innocent men.